I want to go back to if you find yourself in a bad relationship, and well, firstly, how would you recognize that you're in it for too long,
Mm.
and then how, if you do recognize that it's not a great relationship, and maybe you got into it out of scarcity or whatever the situation is, how do you recognize if it's salvageable, whether you should work on it,
Yep.
and yeah, and how long is too long in your opinion?
Okay. Well, so the first issue often comes from people not knowing what makes a good or a bad relationship because they've never had a good one. So that is problematic when if you have had little experience or you came from a not very loving family or the first relationship you got into was kind of abusive or boring or neglectful on either side. And remembering that bad relationships are your fault as well. Right, so I'm certainly not blaming women for bad relationships. It's like I'm very much to blame for some of my bad relationships, and others I was less to blame. But the point is that you have to take responsibility for your part in it. So, and then the question is like, well, how do I see what is a good relationship? Am I supposed to look at people's Facebook feeds and then like go, okay, so you need to have all these great selfies of me in Bali and like of us like sipping lattes and like what is a good relationship anyway? So that's something that takes some soul searching, takes some investigation, and it's one of the reasons why I recommend with guys I teach, they don't jump into a monogamous relationship straight after they learn how to meet girls. And inevitably, like who here, put up your hand if your first relationship was a bad idea? Like, Rhea wasn't your first.
No,
Right.
no, she's and that was a big part of it because I've had many relationships. When I met her, I was like, yes, fuck yes, we're gonna make this a relationship.
Right. Yeah, so it's like, okay, it's inevitable usually that you're going to fuck around a bit. And that's why it is good to get I think, sexually active early and start messing around with the relationships in your teens and early 20s to start figuring out how you can not be a cunt in a relationship, how to choose someone who's not a cunt, and to figure out what's fun and what is enjoyable about relationships, as well as seeing all the drama and the heartbreak and the betrayal and the jealousy and all the other stuff in there and starting to figure out how to navigate through that. Because if you don't sort yourself out with those particular things, they can destroy your relationships for the rest of your life. So then it's like, that's why I think it's important to have a variety of types of relationships that are not 5-year monogamous relationships. I think it is, there is of great value, and it's something that is a privilege and a rare thing to have the opportunity to do in the course of human history. And now many people have the opportunity to go, well, I don't have to get married to hold the family farm together. I don't have to have children if I want to have sex. And I don't even have to get diseases if I don't want to. And I can just do that 20...
Sorry, I'll have a couple of diseases.
couple of
over here,
diseases
please.
if you want, have them as well. And I can do that 20 times or more if I want to over a course of some decades. And then still, if I want to, have children. So it's like, it's not either or. We are in a really interesting period in history where you can choose to go, all right, yeah, I want to fall in love, desperately in love a number of times. I want to sleep with all of the sirens of the East and the West. And I also want to have children at some time.
We just had a light go down. One thing. Let me fix that.
Yeah, it's quite common to fuck it up early on and to take some time to figure out what you even want out of a relationship or what it means to be respected or to be loved or to be treated well, to be listened to, the various ways that humans need to be validated and heard. And some people, unfortunately, never get there because they just repeat the same mistakes and unknowingly, it's not necessarily that it's their fault, and they get into shitty relationships over and over again, and then they have children with somebody, and then we know that story. So the answer to your question in terms of how do you know when it's not a good relationship anymore, my benchmarks are pretty extreme, like because I have pretty high expectations. But firstly, if you are not getting as much and sharing as much sex as you want, and that's not because you're just like doing it like where you roll up on Wednesday night and go, yeah, can I have a blowjob? Like, if you want to have a great sex life, you need to be putting effort in and you need to be seducing your woman over and over again. Seduction is not just in the pickup stage, it's throughout a relationship. So, it's like if you are actively being sexual, sensual, flirtatious with her and she doesn't reciprocate, or vice versa, like half the level that you want it or a third of the level that you want it, I'm out. I'm fucking out super fast, right? Because I know for me, it's like having a beautiful sexual bond with someone is very important, and I want to be experiencing that pretty much every day. So, and that's a common thing. I've talked to many of my ex-clients who are like, oh, you know, me and my ex-girlfriend or wife didn't have sex for the last 3 years. I'm like,
Then
why?
at that point, you're just friends.
You're friends that you have to pay for her food, and that friend doesn't let you have sex with anybody. It's like, this is ridiculous. So if it's like you've gone for a month and your girlfriend doesn't want to fuck you, or your boyfriend doesn't want to fuck you, and I've talked to women who've had this experience as well, where it's like, oh, you know, you just wouldn't fuck me anymore. I'm like, get the fucking arsehole out of there. You're a hot young girl. Go out and find some good dick. So there's that. I think that's important. And I'll come back to like, how do we fix this in a minute? If that person belittles you in any way, particularly publicly, if that person doesn't have your back, if that person is constantly probing at your weaknesses, and there's a difference between particularly a woman testing a man to like try and encourage him to stand up and like not be a pussy, which women will do. Like, I don't really get nagging in my relationships, haven't for a long time, whereas I used to get a lot of nagging back in the day, and I used to think women nag. That's, fucking women, they're always nagging at you. Yeah, they nag you when you're being a loser. They nag you when you won't just do the thing that you should be doing without being nagged. So, like, again, you have to recognize what's your part in this, and this is mistakes you'll make and growth you'll make, hopefully, if you become self-aware. But if you have a partner who, despite the fact that you're living more or less your truth and power, up and down, whatever metrics, depending on the mood or what's happened at work or whatever, and they don't treat you with respect, and they don't show that they adore you or look up to you in some ways. Not that a woman needs to be subservient, but like, I look up to my girlfriend in some ways, she looks up to me in some ways. I respect her for certain things, she respects me for certain things. We both want to fuck each other pretty much every day. And if one of those things changed vastly, then there would be a serious problem that needed to be addressed, or the relationship's heading to an end. So the question is, like, how do you know when it's time to move on? My basic benchmark for this is, let's say you're in a serious relationship and you notice after a month that you don't feel good in this relationship. You don't feel love. You don't feel satisfied. You don't feel like you've had enough sex. You don't feel heard. You don't feel connected to. And is that because you are shut down, and like, is that something that you're doing? Quite possibly. Or is that something that the other person is doing? Quite possibly. Or is it some disconnect in the way that we're all communicating? If that's happening for a month, then you need to, this is what I would recommend, is you need to do an autopsy of what's going on and figure out, is there something in our external life? Someone's working too hard, someone's drinking too much, someone's not going to their therapist, or not taking their meds, or not doing their yoga, or whatever it is that they need to do to be connected and centered, that you two as a couple have not spent any real time together aside from like collapsing after work, or I'm just making up stuff that normal people do. I don't know what normal people do. Watching the TV together, or some, shit time together, which is just like, very average time. You're not making out time for romance, for seduction, for flirtation, for connection, for having fun, for being silly. And these are things I have to make conscious time for, because I can let months go without silly and fun, because those are not my priorities, but they are partially for my girlfriend. And if I don't if I don't make time for them, space for them, she won't be satisfied.
A lot of time, just life gets in the way, and you have to actively, if all relationships should be important to you in that aspect, so you have to prioritize that, and you have to proactively, to go on dates and proactively, continue to seduce.
Yeah.
I was once working with this filmmaker, and it was his 10-year anniversary, and he was going to go for dinner and a movie for his 10-year wedding anniversary, and that just spoke heaps to me, that they never go on dates. I'm like, how has it managed? And that's the most depressing thing in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, again, we can look at like, what is the point of a relationship? And in some cynical sense, maybe that doesn't matter. Like, the idea that we should have a fulfilling relationship is not a given. And many people, I guess, look at relationships as functional, to serve a purpose, to split the rent, to bring up children or whatever. But like, when the choice is, you can have all of those functional things, and you can also have something that is really enriching and joyous, then why not do the joyous one? And if you recognize that this thing has shifted, and this brings me back to one of the early ideas of the one, a problematic spin-off of the idea of the one is that if I fell in love with somebody, this is the one.
Yes.
Therefore, okay, I've done it.
Yeah. Till death do us part.
I did that thing. So if now this is not working anymore, I can't accept that. I can't allow room that, you know what, this relationship, we were only ever designed by our great fate maker to spend 2 years together, during which time it was an awesome time, and any time after that will be wasted. So that's, you know, when I prefer to teach people about cycles of relationships, not like you know, sit there and wait and then you get one and that's it. No, you need to go out, meet heaps of them, fuck it up a bunch of times, get in all sorts of messy start proto-relationships for a while, and then hook up with one person to stay with them and do the living and learning of that. And then when it's reaching a point where it is no longer good, let's say you've had that month, that was a shit month, you sit down with your partner and you go, all right, that was a shit month. Is there something we can do to adjust that? I'm going to do a bit less shifts at work, or we're going to spend less nights or more nights together, or whatever, something we can do to try and adjust this. Being fully aware that this very likely won't solve it, because, I mean, it can. Like, I had one with my current girlfriend where I was on the road traveling all the time, as you know, and I was spending months away from her for work and travel. And it was reaching a point where the time apart was much too much for her. And so, if it had continued much longer, she wouldn't have been able to handle it. She would have left. So at some point I adjusted my time schedule so that we would only ever have about a month apart with my travels. And that was the thing that then saved the relationship, because all other aspects were working well. It was that this particular breaking point for her had to be adjusted. So I had to compromise or go, no, I'm not going to compromise, and therefore lose the relationship. So there are things that you can do to fix in these circumstances. And sure, you can go to couples counseling and that kind of stuff. And I encourage you to go, even if it's just to get used to dealing with talking about stuff, even if it's not going to fix it. But let's say like a month or so passes again and you look back and go, yeah, we tried and it didn't work, or we didn't want to try, or no, it's getting worse. At that point, a couple of months of shittiness in a relationship, pending any variables we can adjust, it's time to leave. And if you do then, let's say you were with that person 2, 3, 4 years, a couple of months of shittiness at the end, and then you have the balls or the pussy to sit down and go, all right, I'm going to end this now. That means that you can walk away from that relationship. Sure, the people will be hurt. Maybe someone betrayed somebody. There'll be the inevitable not fun bit of the breakup. But that can go from being just like the ending, which was a bit shit, to, if we drag it out for 3 more years, to that totally overriding all of the good stuff. So that then you come out of the relationship after 5, 6 years and you hate that person, and now you hate men, or now you hate women, or now you've got baggage, or now relationships never this, or they always that. When the truth is, it's like, cool, it was awesome for 3 years, 3 months was shit, stayed another 2 months, shouldn't have done that, oh well, finally called it off. Cool, we had a bit 5-ish, 6 months of not that great, and 3 years of awesome. Not a bad use of your time.
And what about when it's just going mediocre for a while? Like, you know, I remember just recently one of your students and now one of my friends, we were sitting up here on New Year's Eve and chatting, and he was saying he was in a relationship till he was about 7 years. He must have been, 25, 26.
Yeah.
And then he was thinking, all right, well, it's 7 years, so I guess we'll put in so much time. It's either we break up or we get married. Like, those are the 2 options. And he was ready to get married, and because he had just accepted that was the lot in life. And luckily, she had the balls to be like, are we actually happy? And that saved both of their lives.
Good girl. Good lady.
That's a much trickier situation,
yes,
which
yeah.
I think a lot more people are in, where it's not clearly wrong.
The slow machine. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, in some ways it's better if someone does cheat, or there steals someone's car, or there is some big thing. And that's sometimes why those dramas happen. Is like, one person, I've done that before, I've cheated on a partner because I didn't have the balls to just end it, and so I've destroyed it in some other way that's ended in a big mess. It still did the job, wasn't very elegant. Yeah. So yes, that is that more insidious thing of like, it's okay. Again, this is like, people are born into all sorts of situations, circumstances, and quite a large number of people have choices about whether they would like to live a very safe, predictable, boring, mediocre life, or whether they'd prefer to take some risks, which are not that risky really, and live an exceptional life, or at least give it a go and it fails spectacularly and then go back to living a normal life. Fine.
Yep.
That was always my thing. It was always like, this may well not work. Worst case, I'm back on my mum's couch. Not great. I'll be fine. Probably worth taking this risk on the off chance, on the fairly good chance that I get something amazing.
I think it was Seneca who said this, which is like you should do, like, basically play out the fear, like play out what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen, because we always set goals, but we should set those fears as well. It's like, well, what's the worst thing that happened? And especially in Australia, what's the worst thing? You know, you're going to break up, you know, maybe, you know, things will go bad and you'll be, as you said, living in your mum's couch. For me, it was, well, if I try and be a filmmaker, then you know, I might have the humiliation of not making it in that thing and going back to whatever, I don't know what the other option is, but they're not that bad. The most, you know, the worst things that's going to happen really aren't that bad in the big picture, and you can just, you know, what's going to take you another year or two of your life to get back to where you are right now. A year or two is not that much time.
Yeah, I think the worst things, any of those things where you see people interviewed at death or like close to death, or people looking back over their lives, what do they regret? It's all the same. They don't regret taking chances and asking out Susie.
Nope.
They don't regret, like, yeah, they may regret putting all their money into some Ponzi scheme, but yeah, they regret not working way too hard on something they hated, not spending quality time with their family and friends, not taking risks when they were younger, not traveling when they were younger. You know, all the stuff that you should be doing in your 20s and 30s now. No, should it is not the right word. It's like what we now have the opportunity to do. Did you ever see that movie Big with Tom Hanks?
Yes. Yeah, I have not for a long time. So
it was funny because I think it was made in the 80s, and the premise of the movie was that a young Tom Hanks wishes on a machine, the Zoltan machine, and becomes big, right? So he becomes 30. Right, so he's a 15-year-old in a 30s body. So what does he do? He gets a dope warehouse. He has a pinball machine. He has video games. He eats whatever he wants. He plays rock and roll music loud. Lives like a child in a 30-year-old's body. I'm 38. I live like that. I've been living like that for since I was 15. It's like back in the 80s, the idea that a 30-year-old man would be a bachelor living in a warehouse with a pinball machine was just like such. It was worth.
I don't have the pinball machine though, so
right. Let's get one. I can get one now. We can Uber one over. Like the idea was that was so outrageous, it's worth making a movie premise about. Now we're like, that's normal. That's, as a 30-plus-year-old man, me living in a dope warehouse and having like toys around and dating bunches of girls or whatever. That's possible now, whereas it wasn't really even 20, 30 years ago. So it's like, for the people that are recognizing the advantages of the time and space that we're in, and recognizing that old idea that, oh, well, if you don't find someone when you're, you know, young, and then you'll be put on the shelf, I'm not going to be put on the shelf until I put myself on the shelf. Like that, or that, you know, you better go from uni straight to that company job, because the baby boomer generation, that made sense back when we had a massively exploding economy and not enough people, and things were situated in the country, that things were made in the country where people used the thing. So, you know, now if you want to take the best out of this time and place, then be mobile, be sexually mobile, be willing to take advantage of technology, of the increases in knowledge around nutrition and longevity. If you look after yourself, you can easily be a super fit 40-something-year-old dude and get married and have kids then if you want, and spend 20 years being a swinging bachelor if you want. Or you can go through, you know, you can have very intense relationships and also recognize that they don't have to be 30 years. I could get probably just as much as I'm going to get out of it in 30 in 5, and then save out both of us 25 years of trouble, so we can go off and find someone else to have another fun 5 years with. So it's like, you know, there are so many, and because of the lessening of constraints in terms of morality and religious controls, not in everywhere, but many places, lessening, although not eradicated, judgment on female sexuality. People can, if they maneuver in the right circles, and can live all sorts of sexual utopias or variations on what the old idea of what the only type of relationship you can have. so you can build it yourself. You can create your own, you can negotiate your own dynamics, whether it's poly, open, primary, casual, threesome, whatever.
So I guess I just want to add in there on the how do you know if it's it's savable. Probably, I think most relationships are savable because they, for most of the part, from what I see, it's just a fundamental lack of communication skills. But saying that, you probably aren't going to be able to learn it in a quick enough time to be able to make that relationship work. So one thing I highly suggest to everybody is to do polyamory, especially, or to do open relationships, because it really forces you to have to learn that skill, to be able to communicate your needs and wants and desires very clearly, and be able to set strong boundaries, and be able to respect their boundaries. But and then if you want to later on settle down with one person, but I think it's much smarter to do it open first and then go into whatever type of relationship you want to afterwards. As I said, because you're going to have to be forced to learn those skills. So from my point of view, if you are in a shitty relationship and you don't have those skills, for the sake of both of your mental health and just overall happiness, it's better to break up and then turn inwards and learn about yourself, learn about communication. And that can be from reading books on open relationships. That's a great place to start, even if you just don't want to even do the open relationship thing, because as I said, the skills you have to learn to be able to manage that make any relationship work.
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways to learn these skills. And I've seen couples, and I've been part of couples where the learning has happened and the salvaging has happened in real time. So it's like where people have gone through major shifts together or parallel because the relationship has brought up someone's jealousy, someone's insecurity, or someone's anger or whatever. And because both parties wanted to fix it, and the person, let's say one person had some particular issue that they were willing to go and get sorted out. I have seen that kind of thing work less often than what you've described, in terms of like, you go through the relationship, you fuck it up, you're too deeply embedded and enmeshed in it to have any perspective, and you're too emotionally off kilter to be able to be objective. And so, okay, it falls apart. It is very important that you take time after a relationship ending to not necessarily be alone. You can still have lovers, for sure, but to do a proper autopsy on it, figure out what happened for you and for her. What was her shit? What was your shit? Were the stuff that you blamed her for that actually was really created by you, which was then expressed through her, or vice versa? Like to try and step back on it without, and it's hard often when your heart's broken or someone's hurt you in some way, but to be able to objectively heal. And a relationship, if it was significant and it's ended, will leave some form of trauma. Humans traumatize each other from birth. We're all going to. Nobody gets out alive. Nobody gets out. We're always going to do that. So you are going to be traumatized in some way or another by a relationship. If at the end of the relationship you just like have a handshake and like, oh, can I have that CD back? Thanks. And that's all you feel. That wasn't a relationship. That was just like two people conveniently fucking each other or something. So taking the damage and going through a healing process. And I've come out of relationships and gone into the jungle and drunk ayahuasca for 3 weeks to fucking vomit it out of me. And I've sought out various types of therapists coming out of relationships. I've taken good pieces of time to go off into nature. I've sought out other simpler types of relationships where I'm not trying to replace. That's a common thing. Like people who are serial monogamists come out of a relationship, feel insecure, feel lost, latch onto the next person and get just as involved as they were with the previous person. Or they're hunting around trying to find someone to fulfill that emotional void that a very intense relationship had filled, even if it was a mixture of, at the end, mostly negative, but still very intense, so addictive. Coming out of that, the best thing to do is to find someone fun and chilled that you can have sex with and watch a movie with and go for a bike ride or fucking smoke some weed or whatever, and not get into something too heavy. And then work out, okay, what is it out of that previous relationship that I really need to take responsibility for? Where am I projecting anger and hatred now against women or against men? And is that going to serve me taking that into the next thing? No, it's not. That's why people with baggage are not attractive, because it's not like it's not like the world's going, oh, that person is a victim, so let's victimize them more. Well, on one level maybe it is, but it's like, it's more like that person has carried the trauma of being a human, of having relationships, has been lived through it, and then decided through a series of thought processes that this is now a permanent problem that afflicts them and curses them, and that every woman or man that they may be involved with is potentially going to cause them huge damage, and so therefore it needs to be treated with suspicion and distrust and closedness and so on.
You're starting in the defense, which isn't a great place
No.
to start a new relationship.
No, and of course it's not easy sometimes when you are deeply hurt, but that's why it's a good idea not to then jump into a relationship. Go in when you're clean. Go, like if that takes a year of fucking yoga in the Himalayas or whatever, so be it. In which time, if you feel like having sex sometimes, good to learn how to have seduction involved as well. So then you can go and have different types of emotional levels of interaction, and you can keep them at bay if you want to. And then when you feel more open to it in a year's time or something, you feel fresh again and your heart's healed, and then you're more open to, okay, I'm open to something else that may be more significant.